Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven and this is the Storytime channel. First things first, I do a giveaway every single week, so if you're interested, I'll tell you later on in the video how to enter. That said, we have some malicious compliance stories, and our first story of the day is by VooDooDaughter. Fine, I won't wear those boots anymore. You win. Another tale of me and dress codes. Background. If you read my recess malicious compliance story, then you already know I'm not a fan of dress codes for the sake of dress codes. So when I left for boarding school, I was utterly thrilled to go to a school that didn't have any uniform at all. Okay, so it's not really that I have a problem with dress codes. I have a problem with conforming. So if you say socks have to be black or blue, 99.99999% of people will assume that you mean navy blue. I am the person who would show up with sky blue, just to silently stand out for a day. Just to give a smirk to the 5 other people who will think, well, they did just say blue. Just to highlight to the bureaucrat who wrote the rules that they're not as airtight as they thought they were. In short, I am, as my hubby would say, a brat. It's just fun, to me, to show people that either or doesn't always have to be your only choices. We'll just say I was an adventurous dresser. I liked unusual combinations, and had I been encouraged instead of discouraged and taught how to sew, I very probably would have ended up as a low-level fashion designer. Clothes were like paint to me after an entire childhood in the same plaid. I wanted to mix colors and textures and brushes. Boarding school is not really a colorful, choose-your-own-adventure kind of place. Well, though I was a precocious child, I was never a rule breaker, save for very calculated rule breaking in my previous story. My mother always said, OP's obedient and well-behaved. She will bend a rule into a pretzel, but she'll never intentionally break one. She was the kind of parent who had to carefully word rules and restrictions when leaving me to my own devices, but also to be careful not to put ideas into my head at the same time. Basically, if you give me the impression that you believe something is ironclad, I'll pick it apart just because I enjoy the mental exercise of seeing if it really is ironclad. But if you're a jerk, I'm going to find the worst way to show you that it's not ironclad. My mother firmly believed that critical thinking is the key to success in life. If you can assess a problem and find a path to a solution, then you don't need to know everything. You just need to know how to find answers. Mind you, this was about a decade before Google and smartphones, so I don't blame parents today for different mentalities. But I do still think I would raise my kids this way if I were going to have any. So I had been raised to believe that the people who get ahead in life are the people who don't just say apple when asked what the red round thing on the desk is. You pick it up, you turn it over, you note the feel and the weight, you mark the smell and the reflections in the wax, and you file that away for later. Never know when someone's going to ask you what the bottom of an apple looks like when there are no apples to look at, right? Anyhow, when you spend your life mentally picking up every problem, question, and object so you can flip it over, turn it inside out, change the colors, etc., mundane things like school handbooks actually become a bit fun. The story. I went to a boarding school with 2 types of dress code. We had classroom dress, which was exactly what it sounds like. We were basically expected to look like young professionals. All the normal rules you would expect. Skirts below the fingertips for girls, shirts and ties for the boys. The handbook was pretty specific, as most are. The alternative was what we could wear in our free time. Town dress, and it was the standard we were expected to dress when seen in public off campus or just spending time in the students' lounge. This was more relaxed, but still rules to keep the girls from wearing anything too sexy or the boys from looking too ragged and torn/cut off/worn out clothes. That sort of stuff. I had a pair of knee-high suede moccasin boots with fringe at the top just below the knee. Actually, I had 2 pairs, one in black, one in brown. They were the most comfortable, warm boots I ever owned, long before the days of Uggs. My mother and I fought constantly over these boots, and it was a great triumph to me that she'd allowed me to spirit them away to school with me. Then one day I was approached by a teacher who told me that the teachers had had a discussion and my boots weren't in the spirit of classroom dress. "But I've read the dress code. There's nothing in there against them," I protested. "I know, it's just been decided they don't meet the spirit of the dress code," she elaborated. "But they're the right color." "I know." "They're the right fabric. Suede is allowed." "I know." "There's no restriction on boot length. You allow riding boots for the equestrian club." "I know." "Then why?" I don't really know if I was angry or sad or an even split of both, but I was emotional. "I wish I had better answers for you." She was a teacher I liked and I knew liked me. I realized it's why they'd sent her. I wasn't the sort to make a scene or cause a fuss. I was the sort to get even. "Okay," I said and walked off. That night, I studied the dress code front to back. I read every sentence forwards and backwards. I said them out loud. I held up every article of clothing mentioned and studied it as if I were an alien who had nothing but the handbook and that piece of clothing to figure out how it was used by humans. It was a pretty strict handbook, I had to give them that, but they had made 2 mistakes. 1, the handbook was oddly unspecific about which items of clothing were to be worn where. 2, nowhere did the handbook say we had to make an effort to actually look good. They discussed what articles of clothing needed to be what colors and how far they needed to extend in certain directions. Skirts below the fingertips, socks above the ankles, sleeves past the elbows, etc. Shoes had to be reasonable colors like black or brown, like my boots were, or other earth tones. But it never said they couldn't be elf shoes, for example. Granted, elf shoes wouldn't be in the spirit of classroom dress, but I digress. I went to bed furious and with vicious ideas circling in my mind, debating whether or not I wanted to pull this particular trigger. Eventually, I decided I'd wait until morning, and if I still felt that way, I would begin phase 1. The next morning, I woke up still pissed and began a mental list of the worst boys in my grade as I walked to breakfast. When I got there, I found a few of them and pointed out that the handbook specified that ties were to be tied in a single or double Windsor knot at all times unless it was a bow tie, and then it was to be tied to the traditional manner. Don't know what that's called. What it didn't specify is what part of the body it was to be affixed to. Nowhere did it specify that ties had to be tied around the neck, just how they needed to be tied. I told them they didn't have to believe me. Just read their handbooks at night and do what they will with the information. The next day, there were ties on wrists, around eyeglasses, foreheads, ankles, knees, thighs, tied them around hands as if to stop bleeding knuckles. Anywhere you could attach a Windsor knot to the human body, there was a boy in my school with a tie there. I was feeling pretty darn proud of myself. Phase 1 was a total success. The teachers were annoyed, but most found it amusing. Until we got to math class. There was a kid in class without his tie on, the one who always wore a bow tie. The teacher walked up to his desk and looked down her nose at him. "I understand you boys are having some fun with your ties today, and I think we've been pretty good sports, but if you know the handbook this well, then you know you at least have to be wearing a tie." He raised his head, smirked, and said, "Oh, I'm wearing one. You just can't see it." The class erupted. Now, maybe he just had it under his pants on his ankle, or tied around his elbow under his blazer. I'll never know. But he went down as the kid who came to class with his tie around his you-know-what. By the end of the day, I was a legend for finding the loophole, and he was a legend for what he had put the loophole around. By morning announcements, the dress code had been updated. We were all handed a printed page, so we couldn't claim we didn't know. To include specifications about ties around necks, and the fun was over for the boys. Phase 2 was a little more in-depth. Read on if you're not already bored. I studied the handbook and I took mental notes. I had been eyeing the most ridiculous pair of boots I'd ever seen at the mall. They were silver with holographic rainbow interlocking circles on them. They sported a 2-inch platform with a chunky 4-inch heel and laced up just above the ankles. They looked like something Rami and Michelle would have worn in their final prom scene or Fran Drescher in The Nanny. Ungodly. I knew I couldn't wear them to class, but I wanted them for town days so bad. Like I said, after 9 years in uniform, I was having fun with fashion. I saved for months and visited them at the mall every chance I got. I had been slowly talking myself out of such a frivolous pair of boots. They were so expensive. But the loss of my favorite classroom boots had reinvigorated my lust for them. And right after my moccasins were revoked, I had managed to save up just enough to afford them. Lucky me. I practically skipped to the store to get my holographic rainbow platform boots that weekend. They were out of my size. I nearly cried. Until I noticed right next to them was the black patent leather version. Until now, they had seemed so tame by comparison. But the dress code had a special section about patent leather footwear. It was specifically permitted, but only when wearing pants. There's an old, idiotic belief that you can see the reflection of a girl's underwear in patent leather shoes if she's wearing a skirt. So I could not wear the rainbow boots to class, but their sister boots in black patent leather with silver details were totally permitted. Silver also being specifically permitted on shoes, as some might have grommets for laces. Still sporting the 2-inch platform and 4-inch heel, mind you. The school didn't have any limits for heel size, assuming high schoolers wouldn't want to be in heels all day, I guess. Something about losing the whimsy of the silver holographic rainbows also had the bonus effect of taking them from a club kid mood to a darker hooker boots realm. And to think, I would never have even considered the black pair if it weren't for my recent fascination with our dress code. The black boots also happened to be on discount, whereas my silver ones would have been full price. So I walked away with enough money to buy a pair of pants to wear with my new boots. A plan began to formulate in my devious brain. I invited my friends to join me at one of the local thrift stores, and we spent the afternoon hunting for the ugliest pants we could find that were still within the guidelines of the school dress code. And we did. They were bright orange polyester pants with little gray-green amorphous dots on them, something akin to an incredibly tiny giraffe print. You almost couldn't make out the green, just that there was a pattern to the orange. Something about the two colors clashed enough that they almost vibrated in front of your eyes, making you half dizzy / half nauseated if you stared too long. And as luck would have it, I scored a deal on an orange shag sweater that was the exact same shade. I looked like a half-finished Sesame Street character on top and a Lost Disco reject on bottom. Oh, did I mention they were slightly belled, straight-legged orange polyester pants? I strolled into class on Monday looking like a rejected extra from Saturday Night Fever. My new platform boots had heavy wooden heels that clunked loudly everywhere I walked. I now stood 4 inches taller, making me stand out even more in the halls, and rivaling some of my teachers for presence in the classroom. I watched some of them glare at my new boots and began to figure out which ones had taken issues with my knee-high moccasins. I could tell the teachers who were getting a laugh out of it too. But I didn't stop there. It became my life's mission to seek out the most horrendous clothing and outfits I could concoct. I didn't care how I looked anymore. I had been so careful when I packed to make sure my clothes had all been suitable. And by their own admission, my boots were within the code. They just hadn't liked them. I had done my utmost to dress within their rules, and they had arbitrarily decided something wasn't good enough because they didn't like it. So now I wore something hideous every single day, so they had to see me in something nobody liked. Every single day. After all, what could they do? Just tell me every single day that I wasn't dressed appropriately but never in violation? At some point I would cry it was personal, maybe even racial. By their own admission, it didn't violate the rules, and I was certain to never violate the rules. That just wasn't my style. Plus, at this point in a battle of wills, you can't afford to get sloppy and give the other side any advantage. Mom always said I was stubborn. The nice thing about boarding school is the girls are happy to share clothes around with anyone who will share back. So instead of just one closet, I had like 30 to pick from just in my dorm. Sure, most of my clothes matched each other by intent and planning, but they looked absurd with clothes picked by or for other people. Someone might have a loud shirt they only wear with a black skirt, but I'd pair it with a printed skirt from 3 rooms down in clashing colors just because I could. Still within code. I wore those hooker boots anytime I didn't have on a skirt. I invested in more polyester than a school should legally be allowed to have on campus for fire safety reasons. I sought out every consignment, vintage, second-hand shop in town, and there were a lot. It was a largely hippie town, so the pickings were fantastic. I put together 3-piece suits with ties that made me look so butch, they actually asked my mother if I was gay at her parent-teacher conference. Apparently, dressing badly makes you a lesbian? I braided my bangs into a single braid and would put heavy earrings at the end to weigh it down, then swing it around like a pendulum over my desk or book during class by swirling my head. Only if I was bored in a class of a teacher I suspected of costing me my boots. Anything and everything I could do to be visually assaulting to the senses, I did. At the above-mentioned parent-teacher meeting, they asked my mom if she could speak to me about my clothing, and she asked, surprised, if I was breaking any rules. They explained about the boots. Mom told me she laughed and said there was nothing she could do. If there's one thing my daughter hates, it's being punished for a rule she didn't know existed, or a rule that never existed in the first place. If you want to make a rule today to stop her, she won't do it tomorrow. I bet you never saw those boots again. But you took away something she loved for seemingly no good reason. She sees that as a punishment even if you only saw it as a request. And now she's punishing you back. Simple as that. I suggest you just let it go and fix your handbook over the summer. Otherwise, you'll run out of paper trying to print daily changes to keep up with the loopholes she'll find. My daughter loves finding loopholes. I should never have given her so many riddles as a child. Upon hearing this, they admitted that the only reason my new boots had been ignored thus far is that, this having been my reaction to the banning of the first pair, some were fearful what I might find to wear in retaliation if a second pair was banned. And, obedient student that I was, I never did wear my knee-high suede moccasins again. Random conclusion stuffs. They never did come after me for a single other dress code issue. Except once when my skirt was too short. Honestly, not intentional, each teacher measured slightly differently. And I didn't return the next year for entirely unrelated reasons, so I don't know what changes they may have made. I'll include a photo of the boots. I've kept them all these years later just for the smile I get when I find them in the bottom of a box while looking for something else. And here's the last shirt I'm sure I have from those days. It's literally the ugliest piece of clothing I've ever owned, and I can't bring myself to throw it away because I think of the story every time I see it and laugh. And I know somewhere is one photo of me in my orange shag outfit. If I ever find it, I'll share that as well. I had a blast tearing that dress code to shreds. So remember to take your problems, turn them on their side, flip them inside out, look at life from a funny angle, and you never know what cracks you might find. And it's another great story of my awesome mom totally having my back. Though looking back as an adult, I'll bet she was a little pissed they banned her boots too. I mean, after all, if they had been more specific in the handbook, she could have kept them at home the entire time instead of in my closet at school, gathering dust. Miss you, Mom. Honestly, I wish I was half as determined as OP was to do anything in any situation, honestly. Have you ever experienced a dress code rule that was ridiculous or gotten dress coded yourself? Let me know in the comments down below. So quickly now, I just want to explain how to enter the giveaway. The way it works is I take every video that was uploaded in a given week, find one random comment that was relevant to the stories in that video, and I give them an Amazon gift card. It's that simple. So all you want to do to have the best chances to win is to leave a comment relevant to the video in some form on every video this week. That's all you have to do, and best of luck. And also, if you could like the videos too, that would help more than you could possibly imagine. And our final story of the day is by Silverhammer96, Freudian Theory and Public Speaking. Senior year, my English teacher was having us present on random topics that she assigned us in order to prepare for our senior project presentations. We were given a topic, had a few days to do research outside of class, and then had to present for at least 15 minutes in the topic. The end of the week would result in a test where each student wrote 5 questions pertaining to their topic. Most kids were given normal topics while I was assigned Freudian sexual theory. Quick background on me and my teacher. I was always the good kid in school. Never had a problem with a teacher. This teacher didn't like my older cousin for absolutely no reason, so she decided she'd act awfully towards me. Would make it difficult to ask her for help after school, try to give me bad grades so I wouldn't get into college, and there's more. I was always polite, but I wasn't friendly with her. Now back to Freud. Because it was senior year and I was ahead on my schoolwork, I spent the next 3 days learning everything there was to know about Freud's unconscious mind. Id, ego, superego, dream analysis, but especially psychosexual development. On the day of the presentation, I walked up to the board and started writing random terms all over it, such as phallic, genital, oral, anal, sucking, swallowing, you get the idea. She immediately tries interrupting me before I stop her, explaining how these are important vocabulary for the lesson, which it technically is, and that they'd have to know the vocab for the upcoming test. I made sure to format my presentation around being as descriptive and explicit as possible and have the test questions reflect it. At the end of the presentation, I made sure to leave the vocab words on the board for the next class. Looking back on it, I wish I had used a Sharpie. The teacher had no choice but to give me a passing grade, especially considering I presented better than a majority of the class. I mean, let's be real. She assigned you Freudian sexual theory. What could she expect from a student that she treated like crap the entire year and tried to do all these rude things to? Good on OP for making this crappy teacher have to sit there and sweat in class while all these graphic terms were explained in class, and good on OP for passing their presentation. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So if you enjoyed the stories today, let me know which one was your personal favorite and why in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, please like this video and subscribe and turn notifications on because anything you do helps this channel grow so much more. So no matter what you do, whether it was just watching the video, liking, subscribing, thank you all so very much for supporting me right here on the Storytime channel. I hope you all have a wonderful day and I'll see you all next time right here.